Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
Hi, my name is Nabil Tueme, and I'm a sociologist and associate researcher at Springtide. I'm your special guest host for the season 6 of the Voices of Young People podcast, and I'm so honored to be hosting the season because we are specifically listening to stories from Latinx young people as they share their own religious perspectives. This special series is offered alongside the State of Religion in Young People 2021, Navigating Uncertainty, and offers a sneak peek into the research that we at Springtide have been doing alongside Latinx youth and young adults. A note about our terminology in this podcast. Throughout the season, you'll hear us use the terms Latino, Latinx, and Latine interchangeably. These are all terms that have been used to describe people of Latin American descent, though some of the terms are contested. Here at Springtide, we're committed to using the terms that reflect young people's values and the ones that they themselves prefer. We are so lucky to get to hear from Ryan Duncan Ayala for the very first episode of the Voices of Young People, Latinx Voices. Ryan is 22 and he's a theater maker and producer living in New York City. So once upon a time, Ryan says he felt called to join the priesthood and was really preparing in earnest for seminary life. These days, Ryan says he isn't really active in the church. But like most things, his faith isn't so black and white. In fact, Ryan continues to feel connected to his heritage, his community, and his faith through his devotion to La Virgen de Guadalupe, the Virgin of Guadalupe. The Virgin of Guadalupe refers to the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, as she appeared to an indigenous Nahuatl man in what is now known as Mexico City, on the ancient site of the Nahuatl mother goddess Tonantzin. She is a complex and powerful figure in Latin America, and we will be talking about her a lot this season. You'll hear many variations of her name, such as La Virgencita, La Morenita, Lupita, La Primera Mestiza. I mean, we could really go on. And we'll discuss the significance of some of those nicknames in episode 5. Now, here with his story is Ryan.
My name is Ryan Duncan Ayala. I use a lot of he and some they pronouns. And I am living currently in New York City. I'm a Mexican-American, person from South Texas. I grew up on the border there. And I identify as Catholic, though I haven't been practicing for a little bit of time now.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. So we are going to be talking a little bit about your faith life today, or the ways you make meaning and build community, and navigate your identity and some other things that come up. So you had already mentioned this a little bit already, that you identify as Catholic and haven't been practicing for some time. So I'm wondering, for some people, their religion or faith or spiritual system is really deeply connected to their Latinx identity. You had mentioned you're Mexican American. So is that the case for you?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think, so I grew up in a border town, 97% Hispanic. Going to Roman Catholic Church was like the thing to do, for sure. And so I grew up, I was a cradle Catholic, whole 9 yards, got baptized when I was a baby, went through, First Communion and everything like that. And then around high school or so, a lot of my experience going to church was tied to going with my dad on the weekends, and my mom would stay home. And my parents got divorced when I was at a young age. So eventually when teenage angst and stuff like that gets in the way and you start feeling resentment towards your parents, that kind of fizzled out for a while. But, you know, the real matriarch of my family, my grandmother, was always spiritual, but not necessarily religious. So like we knew she prayed every night. We knew like she had her rosaries everywhere. She had everything. And it was just an inherently, I think, cultural thing rather than being a specifically religious thing. And so it was always a part of my life. And then it became a huge part of my life and my identity in high school. And yeah, I guess the rest is kind of history from there. I think I went to summer camps a lot, you know, like Catholic Life teen summer camps and stuff like that. I'm sure many people have been to those. And it was always just interesting seeing the juxtaposition of like my group from the border that were like very proud of our heritage and very proud of like where we came from and how that tied into our identity. Um, Juxtaposed to the people that would come in from Wisconsin and from Florida and everybody else that were, you know, Catholic first and then, you know, from Wisconsin. And we were like from Laredo first and then Catholic in a way.
So that's interesting. It sounds like being from Laredo had primacy for your identity, and being Catholic came second. Are there any moments where it felt like being Latinx or being Mexican and Catholic were tied?
Yeah, you know, and I think about my life now a lot of ways in where I don't, you know, obviously like a practicing Catholic is someone that goes to mass every Sunday and confession at least once a year and all that jazz. And I haven't done that for quite some time. But I feel a lot of ways that my identity as a Mexican American and the way that I try to express that in the incredibly diverse world that New York City is very much always rooted in like faith. You know, I feel like, and we've talked about this before, like the Virgen de Guadalupe is like such a symbol of obviously Catholic faith, but even more so about Mexican Chicano identity. And so when I'm, you know, here trying to figure out my, you know, my outfit for an opening night, you know, because I'm gonna take pictures taken of me and I want people to know that like I am Chicano and like I really want to scream Chicano. The first thing I look towards is something having to do with the Virgen, because like that's so tied to my identity as a Mexican American and as a Catholic. But I think it's just something that people understand innately is that you see the Virgen de Guadalupe, and that's someone who is likely a Mexican. And I love it. Like personally, I think it's wonderful, and I think it's a great way to do both simultaneously, I guess. I was very active in church when I was in high school, and so that led to like a lot deeper meaning to a lot of things. And not to say that like anyone who is just like a, you know, going through the motions practicing Catholic is not like deeply connected, but I felt personally like my spiritual relationship was just incredibly deep, and that I took the time to like study theology, and I took the time to like really dive into a lot. So I feel like a lot of that stuff just doesn't leave me. Even though I'm not practicing, I feel like the relationship between Mary and her son, and the story of Juan Diego going to the mountain and seeing La Virgen and all of that stuff. I mean, the first Life Teen Summer Camp I went to was Camp Tepeyac, which is the mountain that Juan Diego saw La Virgen on. And so all of these things, like, it can't just be cultural for me, I think. Like, I think there's like something there now about like a mother's love and about like how she loves us, and you know, all of that is just indelible on me. Like I just can't get rid of it, no matter how much I would maybe want to separate the two to just like, you know, live my life and you know, being culturally cool or whatever. It's just, if she's around, like, obviously I know the significance of it in a really like internal, deep way, I guess.
So, Ryan, you had mentioned that you have experienced some changes in your faith, your religious life. Can you say a little bit more about how that's changed for you?
Yeah, well, so throughout, when I was at home and when I was, I mean, I was really, really involved in church. I know I keep saying in high school, but it's true. In high school, I was so involved in church, since from like the 8th grade onward through like my senior year. I was on every retreat committee. I was going to summer camp. I was leading Bible study. I was going to church at least like twice a week for mass. But like physically in the church space, like 5 times a week. That was just who I was. And I was going through like the vocational process at the time of, considering the priesthood. And I remember specifically at summer camp feeling like it was something that I was called to. And so it was something that I explored for many, many years. And then for a long time, I think from like sophomore year, through my senior year, I felt like this is just what I have to do. Like it wasn't, it originally was something that I was very excited about and very like, this is my calling. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm very happy about it, very excited about it. And then it was just like, well, I don't know what else I would do if I didn't go into the priesthood. I don't know, I'm already on this track to, okay, let me contextualize real quick. So starting my junior year of high school, I was in this specialty program in my hometown, that enrolled me as a full-time college student and dropped me out of my traditional high school. So I was like fully immersed, taking like 17 hours of like college classes, and living a college life from being 16 years old. I was like no longer in high school. I was just a college student. And at the end of those 2 years, I got like my high school diploma and like enough credit to have an associate's degree. So having that in context, I was already on the track in college of like studying philosophy and doing all that stuff because that's what I had to do if I wanted to, when I turned 18, join the seminary, be ahead of time, and like, become a priest within the next 3 years or whatever. So that's where I was at. And I was like, well, I don't even know what I would do at this point. I'm already on that like pipeline to studying what I want to be studying in seminary. I was not good in philosophy classes. I just wasn't. But I was like, well, I have to get used to this. This is like the rest of my life. Right. And I kind of lost the luster for it in a big way. But it was just like, well, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm going to continue to do. Eventually in 2016, I went to one of the Steubenville conferences, that the Franciscan University does. It was their first conference in Texas. We all went, and I did like this week-long program ahead of time called Franciscan Lead. That was that I think was single-handedly responsible for like really deepening my faith in a big, big way. And throughout that time, I had like learned about, I grew up in a space where youth ministry and things like that were volunteer based, and they weren't like really something that was like highly regarded. And so I learned that like Franciscan had like a track to become a youth minister and things like that. And so I was rejuvenated in the faith a little bit and was like, this is the path I'm going to go down now. I don't know that I'm called to the ordained life, but I'm called to like serve. And, things kept going back and forth. I started looking at different brotherhoods as well, specifically like Brothers of Christ Jesus, is a small community based in Denver, felt like really right for me. And so I was considering that life. And all of this just just kind of came coming at me and coming at me and coming at me. And then I left the nest. I left home, and I didn't have my home community anymore in a real way. And so that desire to keep going to mass and that desire to keep seeking out the faith kind of started going away. And I was exposed to new ideas like you usually are in college. And I think at a certain point, I just, started letting some of it go, or rather, I started letting other things become important to me. And so at the time I was studying accounting now instead of philosophy, which was a crazy switch. And I was also highly involved in theater community, which is what I do now. I work in theater for a living, and that's like my life now. And it's something I had always wanted to do, but never like dreamed was like a real career path. Which is why it like was never in my mind when I was originally like, well, this is what I'm studying. And so like my only choice is to become a priest. Because theater was not an option. And so I started kind of separating myself and, gaining life experiences. And at a certain point, I felt like we hit in the country like a weird point politically where religious became synonymous with conservative, and conservatism became synonymous with something that just like felt ugly and that people didn't want to associate with. And so all of that culminating and seeing my friends that I had spent so much time with and like poured my soul and heart out to start like picking up these flags that I didn't, picking up these battles politically that I didn't agree with, and really like grasp onto those because that's the landscape that we lived in at the time. Seeing all of that happening, I think just kind of pushed me further and further away from it. And eventually it just becomes a factor of like, you're out of the habit. You're not, you haven't been going to church, and now your Sundays are like for work or for rest or for whatever. Working in professional theater right now, you work 6 days a week, Tuesday through Sunday, and you have Mondays off. So like, that's just become my life. And so, yeah, I think somewhere along the way, with the mix of like political ideology, which like shouldn't be, in my opinion, mixed with religion in the first place, and all of this stuff has just led me down the pipeline of knowing in my heart of hearts what I believe in, and knowing that right now what the American Catholic Church looks like is not what I believe in right now, but the tenets of it still feel like they ring true to me in some ways. I don't think that I can make one and one add up there anymore, because I was having this conversation with an amazing friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. We were about just our beliefs and our faith, and like I cannot make it not work in my head that like God exists. Like obvious, like there's no part of my being that like can reject that fact, because of the experiences I've lived in my life and the things that I know and that have happened to me firsthand. I cannot reject the fact that God exists, and that he is looking out for me. And so I believe in a lot of the core still of what the Catholic experience is, but I think there's like just been a misconstrued nature by like the institution of the church, which we can talk about for hours and hours, of like how the church has fallen throughout its entire history, like 2,000-year history. But at the end of the day, like the church right now does not represent what I believe in and what I feel like I know is true within my faith and spirituality.
Okay, I see. Thank you for sharing that. for a long time, you were very actively engaged in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think kept you engaged with that community for so long?
I think at the time it did really feel like it reflected what I believed in, that, especially at that time. I think I've like grown and gotten some different beliefs since then. And I think I like understand the world a lot better now than I did when I was like 15 and in high school. But yeah, I think above all of that, it was the sense of community and like feeling like I was a part of something, you know, even though I usually felt kind of like not an outcast, but like an outsider within the church group, because I was like the one that was way more into it than anybody else was a lot of the time. I feel like, you know, that was my family. Like, and like when things weren't well at home, like the people closest to me at church were the ones that were always there for me. I feel like I had never had like friends like I had when I was at church, you know? And I think that was only something that like could have happened with this, you know, the people that I was associating with at church were not people that I would have hung out with in school ever. They were, you know, they were people that were like, in my opinion at that time, like cooler than me and all this stuff. But we had like this common thread of going on retreat together. And so we started spending more time together after that, because you know when you get that retreat feeling where you don't want to lose that feeling, and so you like keep chasing it and chasing it and chasing it for weeks after. And some of us just never let go. I mean, I was still on Thanksgiving chatting with a friend of mine from when I lived my retreat in 2013. You know, like it's still there, and he moved away from Laredo like a couple years after that. So I have not been in contact with this man in forever, and it's still there. You know, we're still cracking jokes with each other, and we're still like see each other when we can. Yeah, it's the community, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds like a really strong bond.
Yeah.
So, Ryan, can you tell me a bit about a time that you felt an abundance of faith, or that you felt deeply connected to your center of meaning?
Center of meaning. Oh, that's huh. I think, you know, obviously the experiences I had that caused me to like believe so deeply in like not let that go are like really big moments for me, you know. A big catalyst in my faith journey was the loss of my grandmother, who I mentioned earlier, the matriarch of my family in a big way. And so she's the woman that raised me in many regards. I so much love to my parents, but my grandma picked me up from school every day and took care of me until the night when my parents got home from work. And then I would spend like a little bit of time with my family, and then we go to bed, and the next day it would happen all over again.
Abuelas hit different.
They do. And like, I think there's like, we had a really interesting connection just because like I was a kid with a lot of trauma and a lot of emotions. And so like, she was like very treaded carefully, but like was still a stern abuela. So like, you know, it is what it is. But so she passed away in 2013 or 2012. And from then I was just like, it kind of like wading in open waters, trying to figure out like where, you know, she was the first person that was really close to me that died. And so I was trying to figure out what that all meant at the time. And so my brother had started being involved in church at that time and decided to bring me along to like an adoration night. And it just, my experience there, I won't get into like a lot of the details, but like is one of like the core reasons why I feel like there's no doubt in my mind that like God has to exist, is because of that night. and then that carried on and carried on. And like for the first 2 or 3 years of my faith journey, a lot of it was dealing with the fact that like my grandma had passed away, and like how do I cope with this, and how can my faith help me cope with this? And so that was a moment of abundance for me, for sure. Those first, 2012 through 2014, where I was on fire. You know that phrase, like I was on fire. And I think again, when I have been living my life experiences post being super involved in the church, there have been moments where I just don't know what to do. I don't know like what I'm doing anymore in a large way. And faith is always a thing that like ends up right back at it. So, moments where I'm up for a big job, or I'm up for like a big fellowship or something like that. And I don't, or like I'm up for multiple things at once and I don't know. I'm like, I recall like driving around upstate New York and just being like, God, whatever you want, God, like just go for it. I won't, it'll suck, but I won't be upset about it. Like you do whatever you want. And I know that'll be the right thing. And it's happened time and time and again. Like this job that I was so excited for, I was going to move to California. I was going to like be living on an amazing salary, and like just my career would be set at that point. But I wasn't sure if it was exactly what I wanted. I was like, God, whatever you want, it's yours. It's in your hands, whatever. And I didn't get the job. And now I live in New York City, which I never imagined I would be doing. And I'm living an amazing life and I'm loving what I'm doing. Yeah. And so moments like that, or moments where I'm reflecting on like what stories I'm intended to be telling, because that's what I do for a living, is I find stories that I intend to tell. And this is where a lot of things stray from what may be the typical institutional belief of like religion. And like, what stories am I meant to be telling? Okay, we're going to contextualize one more time. There's this play by Federico Garcia Lorca, a Spanish playwright, from like the early 1900s, called Yerma. And it's about womanhood and dealing with the fact that she's not able to have child. And it is this beautiful poetry driven story of womanhood, from like the 1920s ish, in like a rural farm town. And I'm in love with this show, and I've been wanting to like retell this story in what that means in 2020, 2021 for some time. And at the end of the day, like this story is about like seeing women as wholly part of a society and things like that. And so I was like, what is like this story supposed to be? And for some reason, I don't know why, because like this was like a random thing, but I was like, I was in a spiritual moment and feeling abundant spiritually. And I was like, God, what am I supposed to be doing? What am I supposed to be saying with this? Like, what community am I supposed to be uplifting with this? And the answer ended up being like really clear to me, that like the issues that trans women of color are going through right now is so important to uplift, and the most marginalized of our community are trans women of color. And for some reason or another, I can't make two and two add up, of course, of like, this is in like a moment of prayer, this is what came to me. And like I don't like do moments of prayer super often anymore, but like when I was feeling an abundance of faith, this is the kind of thing that spoke to me. And this is why there's like this dissonance between me and the church, is because I feel like the signals I'm being told and being given are to uplift the most harmed in our community, which I think goes one in one with the tenets of my faith. The most ousted in the community is the people that you have to uplift. the Mary Magdalenes of the world, and that is right now trans women of color.
Just a quick break to thank the donors who make this podcast possible. Springtide Research Institute is supported by donors who believe in the critical research and insight-generating work we do on behalf of young people. You too can help sustain the work of Springtide so that resources like this podcast series can be made alongside our research reports. Your one-time and ongoing gifts allow us to continue our mission to equip those who care about young people to care better. Visit springtideresearch.org today, where you can make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options. Now, back to the episode. So I want to ask you if there are any spaces in your life right now that you seek out for expressing your faith in whatever form that might take. And I'm wondering, because of, your background living in Laredo, which is predominantly Latinx, right? Are any of the spaces that you seek out for expressing your faith today Latinx in some way?
So like working in the industry I work in is very interesting. It's not a conversation that comes up a lot, while simultaneously it's a conversation that comes up every single day. So to say that there's a lot of theater industry workers that had some sort of a religious upbringing, and they either loved the church growing up and then grew out of it, or they loved the church growing up and like it's just a family thing, and so they moved away and that's that, or they loved the church growing up and they felt burned by it and then found a community in the theater community. In terms of like Latinx identity, I feel like anywhere I go, there's like a Latino, doing a thing and they're telling their life story. And at some point, like being involved in the Roman Catholic Church comes up, because it's just like a touch point for so many of us, like culturally. And so a lot of the talk, especially as we've talked about, like with the institution being what the institution is right now, we talk about like where things went astray, I guess, in terms of like our faith and like where things don't one and one add up with what the institution of the church is anymore. But I think generally there's a lot of people of color, and, one of the people I'm closest to in this world is, her name's Gina. She's Filipina, which also we can make jokes about like the connection between Filipino communities and like especially Mexican communities, but just all Latin communities. They're like so similar. They're so close. We talked about, and the Filipino community is also heavily Roman Catholic. Like it's huge in the Philippines. And so, we've talked about things. And so I think always, I feel like my conversations are always more nourishing about like my beliefs and my faith, when it comes to like chatting with other people of color in the industry and people of color like in my life. And so whether they're Latino or Latino adjacent, like I feel like Filipinos are, it always, I think it always comes back to like shared life perceptions, beyond just like the religious life. Like one of my dear friends, Noah, grew up in South Carolina, and they're like a white queer male presenting person, and so like we have some sort of like shared identity there in terms of like growing up in southern states with like a religious community. But I feel like my connection to other people of color as it relates to just our life experience is much more connected, which makes our conversations about faith a little bit more parallel to each other, I think.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense and resonates with me too. So a lot of people would say that, maybe not a lot, but some people would say that to be Latino is to be Catholic. How would you respond to that?
I don't think necessarily. I think there is a lot of Catholicism in being Latino. But I mean, also like super anecdotally, I guess, like there's a huge religious non-denomination community in my like hometown. So there's like a huge Catholic, scene or whatever you want to call it. But there's like a lot of people, and I went to like religious non-denominational services sometimes because they had a lot of fun. Yeah. And I'll say it, they had a lot of fun. And they jammed out the music, and they like played games, and they had like a really like inspiring pastor come and like give a talk or whatever. And so they were great. Like their youth services were like what I thought that we should be engaging in as like Catholics. And so it was like chasing that like feeling, I guess. And so, not all Latinos are Catholic, obviously, because, there's huge communities of Latinos that are like practice other religions, or they're like, there's a huge, this is really interesting, huge intersection of like Latino and Mormon faith. I don't know. So no, I don't think to be Latino is inherently to be Catholic, but I think to be Latino inherently is some sort of religious, honestly. I think that the culture is just so rooted in faith. And I don't know the cause of that, though I would like to. But I think, well, I guess like it, because to be Latino is to be like half indigenous and half, Spanish or whatever. And so, I guess it roots maybe from that, maybe it's like remnants of our indigenous ancestors that, had such a connection, like a spiritual connection to the earth and to the world, that like we have to continue finding meaning somehow. And that is spiritual in some way, shape, or form. In terms of like rituals and things like that, things that I use like every day, or things that are like I think about often, are like really random traditions from when I was growing up. Like, the Rosca de Reyes, like, yeah, I love that tradition. Like I actively try to get Rosca every year, even though it's not easy to when you're living in the Northeast necessarily, right. especially when I was living in upstate New York, like it was like impossible. But I would fly home, bring it back with me, and like, sneak it in my suitcase and try to celebrate in any way possible, even though it's like, it's the feast day of like the Three Wise Men or something like that. Yeah. And so it's like rooted in like religious tradition, but it's so like something that I loved as a kid, and I loved as a teenager to like do this thing every year and see if you got the baby Jesus in the piece of bread. and then like someone would have to throw a party, and it was lovely. It was fun. And so like, it's a part of my life experience that I just want to share with other people. And so, yeah, that's what I would do. Like I would try to get my hands on a rosca, and like, that's just a part of my life now. Like that's something that I won't let go as a part of like my personal traditions, and like the things that I want to carry with me as I grow older, and like as I have a family, down the line, all that stuff. That's just a part of me, and that's both cultural and religious, and like, yeah.
Wonderful. Love it. Ryan, this has been a great conversation. I'm so grateful for your insights and for sharing your experiences with Springtide today and with me.
Thank you.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and to download our latest report, The State of Religion in Young People 2021, Navigating Uncertainty. Thanks to a very generous donation, the digital version of this report is free to download. Springtide Research Institute is supported by donors who believe in the critical research and insight-generating work we do on behalf of young people. Make your own tax-deductible donation with a variety of giving options on our website today. Today's show was produced by Nabil Tweme, Marta Abuaji, and TJ Birnbaum, with original music by high school student Christian Unthank. Special thanks to the 5 guests featured in Season 6, Latinx Voices with the State of Religion in Young People 2021, and to all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Follow us on social media at We Are Springtide and interact with a variety of resources connected to the 2021 report with the hashtag Religion and Young People 2021. Thanks for listening.